Thank you very much.
You got to tell the story, man.
I'll stay out of it.
Not easy.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to sit down because I'm having some ankle issues at the moment. I hope you understand. And I do have some notes as well I'll be reading from, so I'll be jumping back and forth between chatting and looking at my notes. Okay, so as he mentioned, nice. There we go. Okay, so as he mentioned, my name is Gabriel Cardona, and I am a developer evangelist from Avalanche. And the last presentation by our amazing VP of Engineering, Patrick, was relatively low level and technical, so we kind of wanted to end by zooming out a little bit and sort of talking about the things which make Avalanche unique. So specifically, we have Avalanche Consensus, we have a network of networks, we have subnets, and we have virtual machines. So I very briefly wanted to kind of breeze over those and hopefully inspire some amazing developers here in the crowd, or non-devs. Hopefully this will be abstract enough where it'll inspire non-devs as well. But considering this is the protocol stage, I imagine there's a lot of developers here. So I just wanted to brush over what makes Avalanche unique, and hopefully this will inspire people to go check us out in more detail. So I think a natural place to start is, what is Avalanche? So Avalanche is a global financial network for the issuing and trading of all digital goods. And Avalanche Network enables potentially millions of validators to process thousands of transactions per second with near instant finality, and using a protocol which is completely green and quiescent. And we have paired this high throughput, fast finality protocol with an architecture which can really meet the needs of unique decentralized apps and financial applications as well. And we accomplish this through this notion of subnets. So subnets allow anyone, anywhere to spin up a tailor-made network with complex validator rule sets and custom virtual machines. And so if you zoom way out, the way to think about Avalanche is a network of networks. So it's really a platform of platforms. And we envision thousands and thousands of these public and private subnets to all emerge into this global marketplace, which we are calling the Internet of Finance. So let's talk about Avalanche Consensus. What is consensus? I think this is an appropriate place to ask that question. If you work in this industry, you probably hear the word consensus a dozen times every single day. You're probably hearing it a dozen times an hour at this conference. So what exactly is consensus? So consensus is the process by which you get a series of individuals, or in our case, computers or machines, to come into an agreement on a decision. So it's really that simple. What is consensus? Consensus is how you get a bunch of machines to agree on something. And consensus is actually a very, very rich field of computer science. It goes back 40 years to the late 70s, early 80s. And we consider Avalanche Consensus to be the third major paradigm shift in the field of consensus. Oh, sorry. I want to look at this chart on the right here before we check out the demo. So here we have this really great, okay, I can see it down here, awesome. So here we have this really great comparison chart between the three major paradigms as we see them in the field of consensus. So we have classical consensus, Nakamoto consensus, and now Avalanche Consensus. And so the very first paradigm, as you can see here, was classical consensus, and this goes back to the late 70s and the early 80s. And it has, it's very scalable, it's robust, it's decentralized, but pardon me, flip that. That's Satoshi Nakamoto consensus. So with classical consensus, it has extremely low latency, very high throughput, it's lightweight, it's green, it's sustainable, it performs okay in adversarial conditions, or you might even say poorly because it's not as good as Nakamoto consensus. It's not scalable, it's not robust, and it's not highly decentralized. In 2008, 2009, when Satoshi Nakamoto released Bitcoin, the world was introduced to the second major paradigm in the field of consensus, known as Nakamoto consensus. And so Nakamoto consensus is very scalable and robust, it's highly decentralized, but it has, it doesn't have low latency. So, the layer 1 Bitcoin network, of course, I'm aware that there are layer 2 networks like the Lightning Network, but in this conversation, we're talking about the layer 1 network. It only does a handful of transactions per second, famously, it takes around an hour for you to be confident that your transaction has fully settled and will not be reorged out from under you. So, in Nakamoto consensus, you're stacking blocks on top of each other. That's how you have a block height, for example. And the suggestion is to wait around 6 blocks or so before you can be confident that your transaction has fully settled. And in Bitcoin land, a block is 10 minutes. So we're talking about roughly an hour. Of course, it's not exactly an hour, but an hour-ish before you can be really confident that your transaction has settled. It's not lightweight, so it's not green. There's a lot of memes that go around showing that Bitcoin burns more energy every day than some nation states, and that's kind of what I'm talking about here. It's not lightweight, it's not green, and it performs okay in adversarial conditions. Of course, there's the famous 51% attack. And in 2018, a white paper was released on the IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, by a pseudonymous group known as Team Rocket. And they introduced the world to the third major paradigm shift in the field of consensus, and it's what now is known as Avalanche consensus. And so Avalanche consensus is really the perfect storm of features between classical consensus and Nakamoto consensus. So it's very scalable, it's robust, it's decentralized. I believe today there's around 1,300 or so full block and vertex producing validators on our main net. As I mentioned, in theory, the protocol can support millions of validators, so it's incredibly, incredibly decentralized, especially as we move into this world of the Internet of Things, which, we're running smart devices on everything. We hope to see Avalanche running on everything in the future. It has extremely low latency and high throughput. So as Patrick just mentioned, potentially thousands and thousands. I think our X-chain, we say, does 4,500 transactions per second. But as he just mentioned with his Hyper SDK, we've been seeing numbers way, way more than that. So it has extremely high throughput. It has low latency. So Avalanche consensus has completely immutable and irreversible finality in about a third of a second. So as quick as it takes to blink a human eye, your transaction has settled on the blockchain for all time. There's no notion of a reorg attack in Avalanche, which is really, really amazing. It's lightweight, it's green, you can run it on a PC, a VPS droplet on the cloud, you can run it on a MacBook. Like I said, we hope to be able to run on the Internet of Things going forward. It's green, it's very sustainable, and it's parameterizable, so it's very, very resilient in adversarial conditions. By the way, I can't see the timer, so I don't know exactly how much time I have left. So here I have this really great demo. Hopefully this is going to run. It's an embedded YouTube video, so we'll see if it does. But real quick, so I can set this up. 1 second. Let me find where I'm at on my notes. So technically, Avalanche is a metastable consensus protocol inspired by epidemic protocols and gossip networks. And the process used to determine whether a transaction is accepted or not is referred to as repeated random subsampling. And so here's a really great demo, which was created by one of our co-founders, Ted Yin. Ted is, prior to working on Avalanche, he actually was one of the people who helped create Hot Stuff. So Hot Stuff is the classical consensus protocol, which is used in Libra. I believe it was rebranded as Diem, the Facebook's distributed, I don't know if it's a blockchain or payment network, but Ted helped create Hot Stuff, which is the classical consensus protocol used in Diem or Libra. And then subsequently, he's now at Ava Labs working on Avalanche, which I think is very cool. So just to set this up really quickly, in this demo you're about to see, all of the squares in this grid represent a different node, and the color, whether it's orange or blue, represents its current proposal. So does it think this transaction is accepted or not accepted? It's important to note that Avalanche consensus can handle non-binary decisions. So you could pass this 4 or 5 options and it would still reach immutable, irreversible finality in just a fraction of a second. But for the sake of this demo, we're using a binary decision between orange and blue because usually in the blockchain space, you're talking about whether or not a transaction is accepted or rejected. So it makes sense to kind of riff on that way of thinking. And then the darkness of the color, you can see some of them are different colored oranges and different colored blues. Some are dark, some are baby blue. The darkness of the color represents the node's conviction of this proposal. So does this node really, really think that this transaction is orange, or does it kind of think it's orange? Does it really, really believe this transaction is blue, or does it kind of think it's blue? And when I press play here in a second, you're going to witness the nodes will begin to repeatedly sample each other and say, hey, what do you think this transaction is? And he'll say, I think it's dark blue. And he'll ask another one, what do you think this transaction is? And he'll say, I think it's light orange. And after just a couple rounds, and then the node will actually change its proposal and the conviction of its proposal based on what its peers say. And after only a couple rounds of repeated sampling, the entire set will actually tip an avalanche into consensus. It's really cool to watch. It didn't work. Do I have to do anything special to make this play? It's an embedded YouTube video. Oh, here we go. Nice. I see it on another screen. You guys rule, thank you. Do we see it anywhere? I see it on my screen. Up here. We'll give them a second to try and swap it out. No luck? Okay, I don't think so, and I don't have a ton of time, so I don't. Oh, there it is. Can you scrub to the beginning of it again at the bottom? No? Okay. This is a really great demo. If you find me after it, I can share the URL with you. And the main thing here is I wanted to help you develop an intuition around how Avalanche consensus works. And it's sort of counterintuitive that you would simply ask your peers, well, what do you think it is? What do you think it is? And then you would all sort of converge on an answer. But it's really cool to watch, and it really only does take a couple of rounds of asking your peers, and the entire set tips and avalanches into consensus. It's pretty rad to watch. Okay. We're back? Okay, sweet. So there we go. Got it. All right, so I've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to zip through this. So the next paradigm in Avalanche is that we are a network of networks. So again, in traditional networks, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, you have one set of miners and one virtual machine. So you have the Bitcoin virtual machine, you have the Ethereum virtual machine, and then you have a set of miners around that. Avalanche works slightly different than that. Avalanche is a network of networks, like I mentioned earlier, and this is a really good slide to get a sense of what's happening here. So the gray oval represents the Avalanche network. The circles within the oval represent different subnets which are running on the Avalanche network, and then the green squares within the circles of all the different subnets represent the different virtual machines which have been instantiated as blockchains running on these subnets on the Avalanche network. And there's a couple things to sort of note here. You can see that we have lines in between the different subnets. So as Patrick just mentioned, we have Avalanche warp messaging. This is a protocol which allows you to send messages between the different subnets, and we think this is going to be hugely transformative, because prior to this, you had to build bridges between the different networks, which is always an attack vector. It's probably the single greatest attack vector in all of the blockchain space is bridges. And so now we have Avalanche warp messaging, which does away with bridges, at least on Avalanche. It's incredibly exciting. And then you can see at the top we have Ethereum and Bitcoin and Cosmos. This represents the ability to bridge out of Avalanche and into other networks. So I have here from my notes. So it used to be bridge.avox.network, but now that is bundled with Core, which is the wallet, which is specifically for Avalanche. Everybody's been using MetaMask until now. Because a lot of the action that's been happening has been on EVMs or instances of the EVM, but now with the Hyper SDK and the Rust SDK, we're starting to see virtual machines which are specific to Avalanche emerge. And so now we have a wallet which supports that specifically. And so here it says, so since the bridging between Avalanche and Ethereum went live, around $50 billion in ERC20 assets have been bridge back and forth between Avalanche and Ethereum, and that's pretty awesome. We also support bridging between Bitcoin and Avalanche, and I don't know the numbers there, but again, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars which have been bridged back and forth. It's pretty awesome to see that adoption. All right, and then next we have virtual machines. So the way to think about a virtual machine is it's like a state machine. It specifies a blockchain state transition functions, transactions, and an API through which users can interface with the blockchain. And every virtual machine on Avalanche every blockchain on Avalanche is an instance of a virtual machine. So the way to think about it is it's like a class in object-oriented programming. In object-oriented programming, you have a class, which is like a template, and you can instantiate as many instances of that class as you like. And each one of those instances, though they derived from a common template, they're all separate and unique instances with their own state. In Avalanche, a blockchain is an instance of a virtual machine. And so a virtual machine is like a template. You can instantiate it into as many blockchains as you wish, and each one of these blockchains, though derived from a common template, is its own separate entity with its own state, which is pretty awesome. And then lastly, we have subnets. So a subnet is a dynamic set of validators working together to achieve consensus on the state of a set of blockchains. And so my time is wrapping up, so I very briefly just want to give gratitude to the Consensus crew for having us. I'll sum it up by saying, again, Avalanche is a global financial network for the issuing and trading of all digital goods. And Avalanche enables potentially millions of validators to process thousands of transactions per second with near instant finality using a protocol which is completely green and quiescent. So again, thank you so much to the Consensus crew for having us. I'm extremely grateful. You can find me on Twitter at CG Cardona. Thank you, guys.